I think ultimately every company in the world will be a Bitcoin treasury company 10 years from now or 20 years from now, right? It's like every company in the world is an internet company at this point. You have a website, right? But like companies that had a website 20, 30 years ago were internet companies, right? So every one of these adopters is a Bitcoin treasury company now, but I think eventually it'll just be the norm.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Joining me this week is Dylan LeClair, Director of Bitcoin Strategy at Metaplanet. And Dylan, I think the last time you came on the show, you had maybe just started at Metaplanet. So I really just want to go back and hear how you made this transition and what it's been like working for a company that has just exploded over the last year, becoming the best performing public equity of 2024, right?
Yeah, it's been a fun 14 months. So excited to be here on the show. It's always a pleasure, and yeah, it's gonna be a good
Thanks
one.
for coming back. So how did this even happen? Like, how did you join Metaplanet, and what's the last year been like?
Yeah, the last year's been crazy. Not a lot of sleep, but no, it's I think it was the right place, right time. The stars aligned. People often falsely like give me too much credit. I think the wheels were in motion, and it was just I was in the right place, right time for me to join and make an impact, or in a small way. I was with the UTXO team, and I still am in a capacity, and so. The team kind of was introduced to Simon, and Simon was, it was a company that was obviously, basically on the verge of death from the COVID pandemic, and the stars aligned. Yeah, for a Bitcoin strategy in Japan, there was no other sort of vehicle there, and we had a big opportunity and decided to take a shot.
So this was a hotel company. Simon was on the show sharing that. It divested of most of its property, right? One hotel is left. It's going to be the Bitcoin hotel. So how did it go about executing this Bitcoin strategy? Because the market cap was what, like 14 million, and now it's how many billion?
It's volatile, but it's 5, 6, 7 billion.
I mean, that's crazy in a year. Like, how did that happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it started with top down, bottom up philosophy of Bitcoin first, Bitcoin only. We came out and decided, all of our economic calculation is going to be in Bitcoin. Obviously at a low base, it's not really material, but for the market, it was unique in Japan. No one had ever said that. I mean, really, no one outside of strategy, MicroStrategy at the time, had said that in general, that we're going to evaluate all economic calculation in Bitcoin, in BTC terms. So we said, we're going to sell some equity, we're going to sell debt, we might sell hotels or whatever we can find for Bitcoin. And the market really resonated with that. So it's come in different flavors, and we've tried different things, and the implementation has looked different as we've sort of figured things out. But yeah, I mean, it started with just an idea, and then quickly sort of we caught lightning in a bottle, and it's snowballed into much, much more.
Can you share a little bit more about the advantage that you have with the company actually being in Japan? Because it's a little bit difficult to invest in Bitcoin due to the tax implications, right? Capital gains tax for spot Bitcoin much higher than if you purchase an equity like Metaplanet.
Yeah, there's a prohibitive tax for retail. It's just your ordinary income rate. So it's up to 55%.
Wow.
That could change, but I think there's rumblings of that. Eventually it will change, because listed securities are 20%. And then there's also a NISA account, Nippon Individual Savings Account, that is 0% tax for retail. So you have it's like a Roth IRA. You have like $20,000 a year to invest in stocks. So there a lot of, even if the tax changes, a lot of Metaplanet investors, traders, whatnot are getting a 0% tax rate. So I think that's a structural tailwind for us, or for just any listed equities. There's been a few stats from online brokers in Japan, like SBI, the biggest digital brokerage account in Japan, and we topped the list for the most bought stock in that NISA account.
Wow.
And so I think to us, that shows there's clear demand for Bitcoin. We're telling investors that our goals are denominated in BTC. That's how we benchmark ourselves, and I think that's how we communicate to shareholders to benchmark us. And it's really resonated. So the tax was a big thing, and then also just the lack of options. They're like, for the longest time, it's like, sort of how the US was in 2020. Like there's a lot of money in brokerage accounts or in the traditional world that wants exposure to the asset, they can't get it. Right? Like in 2020, the U.S. investors at least had GBTC. You could go on OTC and you could buy the pink sheets and you could buy GBTC. It was a closed-end trust. It wasn't perfect, but you could still get some exposure. You could buy some miners or whatnot. There was nothing like that in Japan. So for us, for the Japanese investors, we were, sort of that first option, and it was a big, structural advantage for us, and still is.
Next up, a quick word about my friends at Bitwise. They've been educating investors on Bitcoin for more than 7 years, have over $10 billion in client assets, and a team of 100 plus. Their weekly newsletter is a must read. It's written by their CIO, Matt Hogan, one of the best minds in the business. I highly recommend it. It's witty, bold, and quick. Takes just 5 minutes to read each week. So head over to bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo. And always, of course, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto. Coin Stories is also brought to you by Bitdeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and high-performance computing for AI. Bitdeer trades under the stock ticker BTDR and boasts a massive 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity across 3 continents, positioning Bitdeer as one of the most diversified and power-dense computing companies in the world. Learn more at bitdeer.com. Metaplanet has been issuing a lot of strike warrants in order to raise money to purchase Bitcoin, right? Can you explain for people who don't understand really what that means, how it works, and why was that strategy deployed?
Yeah, so we were tasked with essentially reverse engineering the ATM facility. So one of the things that we do as a Bitcoin treasury company is when the market when it's advantageous to do so, we can sell equity and we can buy Bitcoin. And if we're the valuation's at a premium toward an asset value, then it's accretive on a per share basis. And so there's no ATM facility in Japan. So in the US, you just file a shelf registration or an S1, and you can, the strategy is a seasoned issuer. So they can file at 8 a.m. and they start selling stock at 9:30. Mm-hmm. For us, it's not that simple. And so we reverse engineered that in Japan. It's a moving strike warrant. Technically, it's a stock acquisition right with an exercise price adjustment provision. It's a moving strike warrant is just a simpler way to say it. But what it means is if our stock goes up, it's not a fixed strike. It's not saying, hey, this is a right to buy the stock at 100 and it stays there. If our stock is going up, then this moving strike warrant is going up, and vice versa. And the way it's structured is, we're only selling equity into strength. So when the stock's falling, our counterparty is not selling shares, and we're not exercising shares. So it's a really beneficial plan and execution strategy for our shareholders. And we had tremendous success in the first quarter of the year implementing our 210 million plan, which was issuing 210 million shares to raise about what was it, $650 million over about 60 trading days.
I want to talk to you about your 555 million plan. But first, let's reverse a little bit the clock, because I remember when you were tweeting announcements of, acquiring 20 Bitcoin. I mean, this all started slow, and sometimes people don't appreciate even the early strategy or MicroStrategy days, right? Like, it took time to build up to the liquidity that you have now that is so advantageous. Can you talk about those early days and how, one thing built upon the next for you to grow as fast as you have?
Yeah, it was kind of funny back in the day. Just about a year ago, really, people were giving me a hard time, or kind of joking back and forth that we were just too small and it was gimmicky, right? We were buying 20 Bitcoin, 30 Bitcoin at a time, and at that, for us at the time, it was a 20% increase in our stack, so it was meaningful. But it was really about, we were saying to the market, this is our strategy. We have no intention of changing. We have no intention of stopping. Even if it's 20 Bitcoin, that's significant to us.
Yeah. That's going to be a lot someday.
Yeah, it's a lot now. But yeah, so people thought it was just a gimmick, but for us, we were just in the early days, right? And so, now the past 3 buys, it's been over 1,000 Bitcoin each, which is a lot of money, $100 million. But yeah, it was, we've really were taking any tools we could get, right? So we borrowed money against the hotel, and then we did a rights issue. And a rights issue is something that is usually, as a company in real weakness, does a rights issue. It's dilutive. It's some people say it's a gun to the head to your shareholders, because you're basically saying a rights issue is you give every shareholder the right to buy the stock at a discount. So if you don't exercise your right, you get diluted, and usually the stock falls. So usually it's a lose-lose for a rights issue. Shareholders don't like it. For us, we did a rights issue and the stock tripled.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
And so a lot of things that kind of flew in the face of like the efficient market hypothesis. But it was, to us, it was validation. Like shareholders don't want Bitcoin,
Yeah.
At the time, our rights issue was like to raise 80% of our market cap, which was $70 million. So it was significant. But yeah, all that sort of stuff in the early days was us, sort of getting to the scale that we are now, where we can really efficiently, run our playbook and run what looks more like what MicroStrategy is doing.
Well, this is something TradFi really doesn't understand, right? That every time you dilute your shareholders, essentially, but you're buying Bitcoin, the market's happy about it and your stock just soars.
Yeah. When we put out this 555 plan last Friday, a week ago, it is a projected 90% dilution in share terms to raise $5 billion. And the Japanese market went, like everybody had an opinion on it. Either you loved it or you hated it and thought it was crazy. But, there was three reasons why it was so crazy. Is one, like the size of it. Two, the terms, right? Like the size had never been seen before. It's the largest stock acquisition rights deal in Japanese history. We issued them at a premium to the market. Mm-hmm. So our counterparty, there's three tranches. One's at a 0% discount, one's at a 1% premium, one's at a 2% premium, meaning that the stock has to be up 1 or 2% for there to be any incentive to sell shares and exercise. And so, that had never been done before. And then three, the craziest thing about both of those was that there was this massive dilution event. It was at a premium, two things that no one had ever seen before in Japan. And the stock was limit up after hours. So it was like this massive, everybody was talking about it because it was three things that were confounding to the market for traditional investors.
Right.
But for our investors, like
they get it.
They only want Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So when we come out with a plan that says, hey, we want to buy 1% of the Bitcoin supply over the next 30 months.
Right? Yeah, and that's the plan, right? You want 1% of the supply, so 210,000 Bitcoin. That's what
we're saying.
Right? Over how many years?
By the end of 2027.
So that takes into account, Bitcoin's ultimately going to have a drawdown, a bear market. I don't know when that's going to happen, but you prepare for all of that in advance and you have the kind of tools in place in order to execute on that strategy regardless of what happens with Bitcoin's price?
Yeah, it's subject to the market. If the market goes up, it might be harder to buy or it might be more advantageous because the capital markets are open. But ultimately, we're setting targets in Bitcoin terms. We put out at the beginning of the year, we had 1,700 Bitcoin. We said we want 10,000 by the end of the year and 21,000 by the end of 2026. And people said, that's crazy. Like it's way too small. And this is just you're still the same company that's buying 20 Bitcoin 6 months ago. This is you're out of your mind. And we got to almost 9,000 Bitcoin. Right now we have 8,888 BTC at the time of recording. And we did that in a few months. And so we came back and, said, what do we think we can realistically do? And through the end of this year, the end of next year, and the end of the year after that. And, we're not one to kind of shy away or be conservative or say, okay, well, we've done well. Let's like reevaluate and wait some time out. I think we want to go big. And I think the market has told us in Japan that they want us to double down. So we are.
I remember during the depths of the most recent bear market, everyone was shorting Saylor stock and criticizing him in the mainstream media, and people thought that it wouldn't survive, and it really has. It's been remarkable, that journey. But how do you prepare for something like what if Bitcoin does have like a 70-80% drawdown and the core business is essentially one hotel? How do you keep things going without actually creating a situation where the company has liquidity issues?
Yeah, well, we're pretty under-levered right now. We don't have a lot of debt. We have a little bit. We have about $80 million of debt. But we quickly sort of extinguish that debt periodically through these moving strike warrants, and then re-lever when we think it's appropriate. Traditionally, approximately, we're about 10 to 1 over collateralized. Right now, I think we're 11 to 1 over collateralized. A couple of weeks ago, we were 70 to 1 over collateralized, which means that Bitcoin could literally go down 98%.
Wow.
So I think our strategy is to stay, we're going to be aggressive, but at the same time, we're not going to get over our skis in terms of leverage. At least that's the plan. And then two, in terms of the operating business, there is still the hotel. We still have the hotel, but about 88% of our revenue in the first quarter operating income of the business was actually premiums from the Bitcoin options market. So we're getting paid to buy Bitcoin through our treasury operations, and that's a bit in the weeds, but that's revenue and that's income for Metaplanet. So it's not only that we're raising capital and buying the Bitcoin, but we're also that's making its way to the income statement, and it's totally changed the business.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a ton of volatility to the upside, to the downside, but ultimately we started the strategy and Bitcoin immediately went down 30%.
Yeah.
And if you're it does that, right? And if you're new to the space or new to the asset, I think that could be a gut punch. But for us, we were actually really relieved.
I saw an announcement that there's going to be some sort of headquarters in the U.S. for Metaplanet in Miami. What's that all about?
Yeah, we are setting up a subsidiary in Miami. I think the idea is we're going to build a really small elite team internationally. Mostly we're Tokyo based right now, but I mean, the U.S. is international hub for capital and finance and Bitcoin, and so we're going to have a presence. I think just in terms of looking at the custodial landscape, but also there's a lot of counterparties and service providers that don't work with Japanese entities.
Oh.
So having an entity in the U.S. Gives us a bit more optionality there, and then also there's could be other plans in the future potentially.
What if those tax laws that are so advantageous to Metaplanet right now in Japan were to change? What if all of a sudden there wasn't that tailwind? Are you concerned about that at all?
No. I think that, there's a lot of stuff right now where there's no ETFs. People said with MicroStrategy, when the ETFs come out, the MNAV is going to go down and there's going to be no need for strategy. What actually happened was the MNAV went up. The premium to the net asset value went up. So I think the tax laws will, they're eventually going to change. I don't know when.
To favor spot Bitcoin, owning spot Bitcoin, you think?
Well, probably just to put spot Bitcoin in line with other securities right now. Bitcoin's not a security, but right now there's rumblings of it. I don't think it's imminent. Probably a few years out, to be honest. I'm not sure. But even then, there's still that tax advantaged silo, right? Where there's not commodities in that bucket. It's just for listed securities, listed equities. So I think that's Metaplanet will still be in that bucket. But no, we're not too worried about it, to be honest.
Let's talk a little bit about just how Metaplanet has set itself apart, because strategy was first and now Metaplanet has just shot up, and that liquidity that you're able to get, that's so important. And what does that enable you to really do? Because other Bitcoin treasury companies are going to be competing with you for that.
The liquidity of our equity, or I think there's a lot of different ways to look at Bitcoin treasury companies. One of the 12 months ago there wasn't really even a framework, or there was a beginning of a framework for how to think of these companies. But stuff like MNAV and all this, that toolkit didn't really exist. Let's call it 2 years ago. So now there's a bit more sophistication in how people are looking at these. But I think there's layers to the onion of Bitcoin treasury company analysis. And one of the most important factors, people often look at static MNAV. So it's well, this company is worth this and their Bitcoin is this, and so they're undervalued. And that's okay to look at, but I think also you have to factor in the historic track record of the growth rate, right? So how fast are you compounding? And then also if you're thinking about the future, it's well, where they're trading right now, but also what's the turnover of the company, right? Because if you have no liquidity in your actual equity, basically your toolkit is closed. You have no options. And so for us, we've been extraordinarily excited to see the liquidity, not only in Japan, but with also in Germany and in the United States through these over the counter, not listings, but I guess over the counter traded offerings, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's the same security as the Japanese listing, just traded in these other markets. And so, there was a few days last week where we were top 3 traded stock in Japan in terms of liquidity. One of the days we were 1, right? So the giants of industry in Japan, and little old Metaplanet is trading more, right? So that gives us a ton of of options in terms of how are we going to raise capital,
Right.
how much equity we want to raise, how much Bitcoin we want to buy. And without the trading liquidity, it changes everything.
Yeah, you really need it. Let's talk about the landscape of just corporate Bitcoin treasuries. It seems like there's one announced every single week. What do you think how do you think that's going to all play out? Do you think that they provide competition? Is it all good for Bitcoin? Will they all do well, especially in a bear market, or will some of them maybe take on too much leverage and then be forced to sell? Just how do you see that whole industry emerging?
Yeah, well, I think it's great. It's really positive. There's virtuous competition. At the same time, I think it's naive there's cycles in everything, right? It's naive to say that every business in the world will succeed. I think ultimately every company in the world will be a Bitcoin treasury company 10 years from now or 20 years from now, right? It's like every company in the world is an internet company at this point. You have a website, right? But like companies that had a website 20, 30 years ago were, internet companies, right? So it's like every one of these adopters is a Bitcoin treasury company now, but I think eventually it'll just be the norm. We're in this, I don't know how many years it plays out, but we're in this kind of intermittent phase where if you do it, you stand out and you get attention globally and you have investors looking at you. And that's one of the reasons why it's attractive, because, there's all this capital that's looking for a home. It's a Bitcoin treasury company. You're sort of like planting a flag no matter where you are. You could be in Germany or Japan or Indonesia or Thailand or wherever. And all of a sudden global capital is saying, look what they're doing, right? Where, who's interested in, a budget hotel business in Japan?
Right.
Not really anybody. But all of a sudden, right, there's global capital that's interested in investing in Metaplanet because of their Bitcoin strategy and the execution, right? And so I think, and I just say that it's an example, right? You can go down the list. And so I think there's a reason why there's so many companies that are doing this. And it's because the success has been proven with multiple case studies, right? It was just like when it's just one data point, it's sort of an anomaly, right? And then 2, 3, 4, 5 data points, and there's a trend. So I expect this trend to accelerate. Ultimately, I think that there's going to be some big winners in every market. 1, 2, 3, 5. Not every company is going to reflexively compound and, buy up a huge portion of the Bitcoin supply. That's our goal. We'll see if we succeed in that. But I think that it's great. And there's going to be sort of a spectrum of how aggressive companies are. Some companies are just going to buy some defensively, right? Just hedge against inflation.
Sure.
Some companies are going to become a Bitcoin treasury company and, dilute their equity and issue preferred stock and convertible bonds. And like, that's the other end of the spectrum. That's, sort of Saylor's playbook that he's pioneered. So yeah, I think it's great. There will be some that don't do well and underperform. That's just the nature of business cycles and markets, but I think it's all positive.
This episode is brought to you by Casa, the leader in Bitcoin self-custody solutions, helping people like me secure their wealth with simple, powerful, multi-key vaults. And now Casa is here to help businesses and even governments do the same. Introducing Casa Business, a secure, easy-to-use 3-key vault designed for small and large businesses with team signing capabilities and a web dashboard. Start your Bitcoin treasury the secure way and protect your assets. Get 10% off your Casa plan at casa.io/Natalie. Up next, Bitkey. Bitkey is a Bitcoin hardware wallet with multi-sig security, inheritance, and a recovery system designed for real life. No complex setup, no seed phrase, just true self-custody without the stress. It was named one of Time's best inventions in 2024. Use code STORIES for 20% off at bitkey.world. Next up, the Bitcoin way. Bitcoin is only freedom money if you control it fully. The Bitcoin Way can help you learn the skills to properly secure your Bitcoin in 100% self-custody with zero counterparty risk. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Natalie to speak one-on-one with the best experts. Your security and sovereignty are priceless, so don't gamble with your future and peace of mind. Want to reach millions of Bitcoin users? Speed Wallet makes it easy. Launch your app on Speed's mini app store. Publish your app in hours, no coding needed. You can also accept Bitcoin payments effortlessly with Speed. Ready to grow? Publish on Speed today. Visit Speed.app. I'd love to get your thoughts on these recent offerings from Michael Saylor's strategy, Strife, Stride, really innovative products. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I would like to say that a few years ago, I I saw this all coming. I sort of thought the secret sauce was the convertible bonds. And I was a bit naive to the capital markets at that point. But in terms of the preferred offerings, I mean, this is clear where like this, I think, not to say the convertible bond era is over for strategy. They still have some outstanding. They might do another one day. But I think, strategy essentially hit their cap. They hit the ceiling in terms of like how big that market was. They were the biggest player by far globally of convertible bond issuers. And the market, it's like not real debt buyers. Really, it's more so like hedge funds that are going to come in and they're going to make a lot of money no matter where your stock goes, no matter where the bond goes, up, down, sideways. The reason that they were such a huge issuer of convertible bonds was because they priced it so attractive, right? It's like it's a 0% bond in interest terms, but actually like the synthetic interest or the synthetic yield of that bond is like 10%,
right?
Because the value of that option was so high, and Saylor and team were selling to these hedge funds, not to say too cheap, right? But they were selling this high volatility, high liquidity option for cheaper than really you could get it anywhere else. And so as a result, there was a huge demand, and they've done, I don't know, 7, 8 of these things. The thing that's interesting that I think a lot of people don't understand or know behind the scenes, and this is a world that I just stepped into the last year, is that the issuance of these convertible bonds, it's a process, right? You go talk to all these investment banks and you talk to these hedge funds, and this hedge fund wants this feature added, and this hedge fund or this person in the deal wants this special clause or bell or whistle added to the convert. And so the whole process takes a period of days, weeks, right? There's a placement process, and then during the process, once you agree on all the terms, the hedge funds go out and they if you raise $1 billion, they sell $500 million of your stock on that first day.
Wow.
So they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, we're in this together. We're in this. And then they short your stock. And so, and it's, when you're selling equity, there's pressure on the market as well. So fair is fair. But I think that it's Saylor describes it as like a heterogeneous market, right? It's like every deal is different. There's work every single time. And there's no market. They don't trade, right? Like it trades, on a Bloomberg terminal for institutional buyers, but me or you can't go get convertible bond exposure outside of an ETF that has unfavorable tax. That's really small. And so this preferred market, it's homogeneous, right? There's three tiers, or there's 3 offerings right now. There's probably going to be more coming. And they've put a lot of thought, and the prospectus on these things is really deep. And the more I read, the more I find different nuggets that I didn't see before in terms of all the different kind of unique features. But there's now 4 at the market equity offerings for strategy. So they have that animation of the gears all spinning, right? But this allows the strategy team to basically engineer BTC yield depending on the market condition, and that's really, really unique. I don't think a lot of people. I'm still, the more I think about it, right? Like the preferreds, especially the non-convertible preferreds, it's like a perpetual Bitcoin dollar swap. It's Bitcoin dollar swap contract being sold into the bond market. Like this is a huge idea, and it's much more, in my opinion, scalable than the convertible bond offerings. Right? It's debt that never comes due. There's a dividend every year, but the principal never comes due. Right? It's like, would you borrow money forever to not pay it back? It's like, right. I wish I could do that. I think everybody does. And so the bet is just that Bitcoin outperforms the interest rate they're selling these at, and I think it's a strong bet. I think it's a great bet to make.
Yeah, the market's shown us that it's been a safe bet with the compound annual growth rate. Dylan, you're so good at articulating things simply. Can you describe the differences between Stride, Strike, and Strife for investors?
Yeah. So I think it's, what Saylor's doing is he's building a yield curve, a credit curve on Bitcoin. And so, Strife, you can think of it as like investment grade, safe, low volatility debt instrument. So, this is like the highest grade. It's severely over collateralized. If in the case of a missed debt payment, your interest rate ratchets, it goes from 10 to 11% and then 11 to 12%. And it's cumulative. So any interest they miss, they have to pay later. So there's all these protections in place. Meanwhile, Stride is basically similar to Strife, but with all of the protections stripped out. So it's non-cumulative. They don't have to pay the dividend, right? And so that Stride is junk debt. And someone, you might say, why would you ever buy junk debt rather than investment grade debt? Well, junk debt pays you more. So while Stride, I think they're both 10% at par value at 100, but Strife will probably pay you, if I had to guess a year out, 7-8%. Stride will pay you 10%, right? And who knows what those rates will, but I think the simplest way to think of it is Stride is junk grade debt. Strife is investment grade debt. Strike is in the middle of those two. Strike is, they call it a Bitcoin with a fellowship, right? It's you get Bitcoin exposure because there's a conversion, there's a call option, right? It's like you have a bond and then you have a call option on MicroStrategy for 100 years, and they're combined, right? So the interesting thing with Strike is, if you go on Robinhood or your TD, Ameritrade app or whatnot, and you click on the options for MicroStrategy, $1,000 call option for next year is like actually pretty pricey. It's like it's expensive, right? Because 1 year out, it's a volatile stock, anything can happen. Strike takes, it's a $1,000 call option that never expires. It's perpetual. So it takes, a fixed income instrument that pays you 8% combined with a call option. So there's something for everybody. Do you want higher risk, higher yield? Stride. It's at the bottom. It's the most risky relatively. Do you want a yield with performance that's linked to Bitcoin and MicroStrategy? Strike is really attractive. Do you want safe, boring, low volatility, high margin of safety? That'll be Strife. So I think that it's pretty genius the way that they're structuring this capital structure. And then at the bottom, right, is MSTR. Mm-hmm. So it's benefiting from the leverage of everything above it, of all the preferreds, and those preferreds are being issued to buy BTC. So all that Bitcoin that they're raising is benefiting MicroStrategy Common. It's also interesting that whenever you issue Stride, the lowest preferred, Strike, Strife, and the convertible bonds all become safer and more attractive. Mm. So it's a really reflexive dynamic between on the capital structure. And I think, to be honest, I think Saylor is going to continue to innovate, and they probably issue more into the future.
And they're all over collateralized.
Severely.
Do you think the market is really missing what's happening here?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that, I think we touched on it earlier, most preferreds or really most debt instruments are based on, the expectation of future cash flow, not asset backed. And strategy has said they're trying to really kind of almost create a new theory of credit, right? We're going to create asset backed credit instead of cash flow backed credit instruments, future discounted cash flow backed instruments. So that's the game that's being played. That's the mission. And stuff like getting a credit rating agency to give a credit rating to these instruments is the next battle. So it's an exciting one. I think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, financial historians will look back and say, okay, wow, that was an inflection point in Bitcoin and the rise of something that we all agree now was inevitable. But right now it flies in the face of traditional, wisdom, which is why it's so polarizing.
Really does. And there are many trillions to go after in the fixed income market.
Many trillions, hundreds.
Can you talk about how capital has just been so mispriced over the last few decades, and why the people that see, the opportunity with Bitcoin, they're in such a strategically advantageous position to take advantage of it, like Michael Saylor is doing with these products, because the wider world and TradFi and mainstream media, they don't really understand that the money's broken. And so you're able to actually kind of reverse engineer this whole entire system, because prices have been, the capital has been misallocated for decades because of the money printing and artificially suppressed interest rates for a long time until recently, right?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people they miss the forest for the trees, and they're looking at things day to day. Or Bitcoin, there's a war headline last night and Bitcoin dropped, and they say, "See, I told you so. It's not a safe haven." And it's like, well, that's just, you're totally missing the point, right? There's a deeper structural rot here, which is that the price of money is centrally planned. Like everybody, especially in the US or Western countries, will go, yeah, like central planning, communism, Marxism, socialism, central planning is bad. We know this, of course. You let the market set the price. And then when you have, central banks at the price of money, no one asks questions. And so, yeah, I think for those that can step back and see what's actually unfolding, you see Bitcoin's just this it's a monetary system that's engineered, that is perfect. The denominator doesn't change. This. We all know this as Bitcoiners. And so that's competing in parallel to the centrally planned price of money. And, on a month, quarter, year, decade long time frame, the results speak for themselves. So anybody that can step back and say, yeah, the volatility doesn't bother me. I'm just gonna measure things in this, yes, volatile, but high performant, absolutely certain asset. And so, yeah, the capital allocators that understand that are I think are the winners of this coming decade.
Right. And you can step into the fixed income, market essentially and sort of take advantage of it. Right. I mean, because that's trillions of dollars of capital. And if you play the Bitcoin hand, you're probably going to become one of the most valuable companies in the world. Yeah.
The Bitcoin backed credit is I think when you ask the business model strategy now, it's, they're issuing Bitcoin, they're securitizing Bitcoin, but it's not just through the equity. Like that was, and that's where Metaplanet is right now. We're in the equity phase of our journey. But strategy, $60 billion of Bitcoin, 2.5% of the supply, they're now entering like the credit markets. And that's where most of the global capital sits and swims. So that's, this is like the real game, is the Bitcoin backed credit. And so I think that, we're only a few months into that journey. That's when the fun starts.
Yeah. Can you expand on that just a little bit? Because I feel like the majority of people, my show audience, a lot of Bitcoiners, but there are people who watch or who listen who are still kind of immersed in fiat or TradFi, and they're not seeing it. Like, they don't understand how much this is going to completely turn things upside down. And everything, the benchmark is the US 10-year, right? And so Michael Saylor, and I'm sure other companies will create innovative products. They're coming in and saying the capital is mispriced. And so I have the ability now to issue these creative kind of products, right? And I think that people aren't realizing what they even are yet.
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand is like most of the bond market is basically, it's like an IOU game, and most of the issuers of corporate debt or even like government debt, like they don't have the money.
Yeah.
like it's a IOU based on future cash flow, or like, the biggest corporate issuers of debt, like they don't have a balance sheet of assets.
No.
They're saying like, in the future, we're going to earn money, which we will get, and then we will pay you out. So that's like the entire rating agencies, and all of that is based on like the money you don't have now that you'll say you'll have in the future that you'll hopefully have.
Yeah.
And Saylor's flipping it on its head and saying, no, like we have the money.
Yeah.
We're going to borrow more, but like the preferreds, they're over collateralized.
Yeah.
Like the junk preferred that he's issuing, Stride, the most risky one, it's like 6x over collateralized.
Yeah.
And so that's a paradigm shift for, never mind the Bitcoin component, but the fact that the biggest borrower is saying, no, we have a balance sheet of assets. We want to borrow a little bit more.
That's wild.
And so, when you have, and that's, never mind built on Bitcoin, which is, again, this bedrock of certainty amidst all of this inflation and geopolitical uncertainty. And so, the implications there are wide reaching. If Bitcoin does what we think it does, which is continue to remain certain at 21 million and not change, and there's a wave of global demand, then the bond market, which, the fiat currency system, as has to expand forever. And so, you're issuing these Bitcoin backed credit instruments. Yeah. Even if you're paying 8%, 9%, 10%, depending on the issuance, I think that something like Strife should trade closer to the US government rate of, 4 or 5%, 6%. It should be investment grade. Right now the market is, I think, underpricing these things dramatically. So there's a lot of upside there. And, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money out there that's getting 7, 8% in really poor fixed income instruments that are riskier than I believe the MicroStrategy preferreds are. So the implications are that there's a few $100 trillion of capital that is mispriced and has zero exposure to this upcoming asset that's, already a few trillion, right? I mean, everybody in the world knows that Apple is like the most valuable company, or Amazon or Microsoft. But here's this Bitcoin thing valued at the same value as these huge companies with hundreds of thousands of employees that are dominant monopolies, with no CEO, with no board, and the world's still sort of asleep at the wheel, in my opinion.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. What if all of a sudden in the next couple of years, Apple and Amazon do create Bitcoin treasuries? Will they blow out the other corporate treasuries because they do have these monopolies and they're so massive?
I think that everybody's going to own Bitcoin at some point, but it's sort of, the paradox is that the companies that were in the most desperate positions that needed to look for a solution are the ones that are, strategy was, facing a slow demise, a slow death in 2020 before they pivoted. Metaplanet was facing a certain death, with the hotel industry before pivoting. Apple with $100 billion of cash, or Facebook like that. Facebook just declined the Bitcoin proposal like with a 90% veto.
Yeah.
No vote. So I actually don't think FANG is going to go huge, or Mag 7 is going to go huge into Bitcoin. I mean, like Tesla owns 10,000 Bitcoin, but no, I don't think that. I think the Bitcoin treasury companies, the companies that are going all in, or the ones that already have a strategy, or the companies that are, it's a need to know basis, as Saylor and others have said.
That's very true. Well, I recently joined the board of Semler.
Congratulations.
I'm really excited about, thank you, our very bold strategy going forward. I would just love to hear your thoughts on Semler Scientific.
Yeah, I had a wonderful breakfast with Eric yesterday, and we had a great panel. It's amazing because I think independent of each other, Metaplanet and Semler started the treasury strategy journey, last May.
Yeah, right around
together.
the same time. Yeah.
And so, I think, it takes a lot of courage for someone like, Semler, like Eric, joining as a sort of activist chairman for his father's company that his father founded, and saying, hey, we're going to stake our claim and go all in on Bitcoin and not look back. And so, a lot of people are often saying, well, like, where's the Bitcoin adoption? Is it like a technical thing, or is it like an economic? And it's like, it's more so a courage thing. And so it was really cool just to spend the day with Eric and also some of the other people at the Coinbase Summit yesterday. I think apparently there was no panel for Bitcoin treasuries about, I don't know, a week ago. And the Coinbase agenda, or the people that were creating the program agenda, were saying, "Oh, wait, the hottest topic we have no panel on." So they kind of slotted us in there last minute. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. I'm really bullish on Semler.
Oh yeah, well, why is that?
I mean, I think the market is maybe mispricing Eric's conviction and the organization's conviction on Bitcoin. And I mean, it's obviously the team gets it, and your addition is certainly doubles down on that thesis.
Well, I can say with certainty, we definitely have strong conviction. So I'm very excited about my role. How do you think these companies will differentiate from each other as we see more and more Bitcoin corporate treasuries? Do the other core businesses matter in your opinion? Especially, let's say, when we do have a downturn, if a company has sort of a two-pronged narrative and has a very strong core business that's generating income and cash flow in addition to the Bitcoin, or do you think the Bitcoin is really what matters and what investors care about?
I think there's different flavors. For us at Metaplanet, I found, and I sort of tell this to other people that are just kind of want my take on things, but I found the more complexity and the more sort of layers to the story, the less interested people are. So it's like, when we were talking in the early days of Metaplanet, it's like, so we should do Bitcoin plus what? Bitcoin and this, or Bitcoin and that. And eventually it was like, I think the story is just Bitcoin. So I think a strong core business is very helpful. But to be honest, realistically, if I said, what does success look like for Semler, or what does success look like for Metaplanet, or what does success look like, if we go back 4 years, what does success look like for MicroStrategy in 2020? What percent of the enterprise value is software versus Bitcoin 4 years from now. And
Right.
right now, the enterprise value is 99% Bitcoin, 1% software. So if I said, what does success look like for Semler Scientific? I would say 4 years from now, the success looks like 99% Bitcoin, 1% healthcare. And that's not because I think the healthcare business is bad or I'm bearish on I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that success on a Bitcoin treasury strategy looks like doubling down and doubling down and doubling down again and again and again. And eventually you're sitting on a pile of Bitcoin that is 50 times bigger than your business when you started. Right. So I think it's important. You want something that keeps the lights on, that makes sure that you aren't a forced seller if, when times are bad, or, something to cover interest expense or whatever it looks like. Every company's different. But I think, if it plays out how we think it plays out, then, a few years down the line, it's a majority Bitcoin story.
Sure. What do you think this whole space looks like in 10 years?
I mean, I think it's probably a bit more boring.
Okay.
Well, no, maybe not boring. Maybe more mainstream. It's a bit, right now, it's like, are there internet conferences? I mean, I guess there are, but it's sort
I
of
see what you mean. Yeah.
It'll be more, it's like when a company adopts a Bitcoin treasury strategy today, it's news. Bitcoin Magazine posts about it and everybody cheers and they get added to the leaderboard list of Bitcoin holders. And right. I mean, you don't really see anybody comparing cash balances for public companies on, the Bloomberg guys aren't posting Nike just stacked more T-bills.
Right.
It's more of just like, this is a corporation that's undergoing operations.
Sure.
So 10 years from now, I think, I think Bitcoin is repriced an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude higher, 10x or 100x higher in fiat terms. I think the Bitcoiners are right. They're on the right side of history. And I think Bitcoin treasury companies are going to be the most valuable companies in the world. Whether that's because the most valuable companies adopt Bitcoin or because the companies that adopted Bitcoin, thrust up to be the most valuable. Probably both of those in tandem.
We're going to be accounting fiat in the quadrillions at that point.
Yeah.
It's like we're getting close to
yeah.
that point.
Yeah. No kidding.
Well, before we start to wrap up, would love to get a little bit of your macro take. Things have been pretty crazy on the macro side. A lot of volatility, uncertainty, tariffs, trade wars, the big print, maybe that's coming, or recession. I would just love to get your take.
Yeah. I'm less day to day than I used to be in terms of the macro analysis. Structurally, I think that at the start of this year, there was a bit of a head fake on like Doge, and we're going to roll back the deficit and tighten the belt and give this a shot. I think that experiment is over. I think it's full steam ahead. As Lynn Alden would say, nothing stops this train. It's not a U.S. unique story, but every country is over indebted. It looks like, in response to a lot of the Trump administration's tactics and trade wars and reluctance on continuing the Ukraine conflict forever. Looks like Europe is in the process of rearming, and Germany's about to run a deficit. So, a lot of these things that for a while were sort of helping keep everything glued together, it looks to be now accelerating. There's now inflation starting to rise and inflect in Japan. A Middle East conflict now is sprouting about, which is another can of worms. So like all these things are structurally inflationary. And it seems like at least the pretense of, hey, we're going to try to get the debt situation figured out. This is Main Street's turn, not Wall Street's turn. Like that was the rhetoric in the US. All of that looks to be no longer the case. So what that means, I think, is fiat number go down in terms of the value of the dollar, the value of the euro, and every other currency. So I'm really bullish in terms of structurally, in terms of my thoughts on Bitcoin in regards to macro. But no, I don't have any 1 week, 1 month, one quarter out predictions, kind of a more of a long-term view at this point.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everything is really putting a spotlight on the value proposition of Bitcoin, inflation-proof money, not controlled by fallible people and politicians, something to opt out of this craziness. All right. Well, I guess my last question for you, Dylan, is Metaplanet has really been life-changing for you. You're very young. Can you just share any like personal anecdote about that? Because I think that you were so early, and it must feel really good to be right? And to be riding this wave, and it must have just like changed your life, your future, your outlook. What can you share about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been life changing, but not in the way, not in even like a monetary way. Like, to be honest, it wasn't really. It's not about that for me. More so like is kind of like a thesis driven sort of like.
Yeah.
I have an idea. It's not. I'm not to take credit for Metaplanet, but like more so like the Bitcoin thesis, the Bitcoin treasury company idea, MicroStrategy as a playbook. And then so just kind of put it to the test and have it, in the marketplace of ideas and have us, on the trajectory we are. I think it's important to like, we're not counting our chips before they're cashed, right? Like there's still a lot of work to do. But yeah, it feels good. I think, less so about myself and more so about others. It's been cool. Like in Japan or just, in Vegas, having people approach and say like, hey, this has been meaningful, or this is really, it helped change my life in a way like that's been meaningful for me. So yeah, I'm really excited and reinvigorated. But in many ways my life still feels pretty similar to how it was a few years ago, right?
Okay.
Still doing the same thing. My day-to-day hasn't changed much. So I feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, you're not your average 20-something-year-old. Congratulations. You deserve all your success. It's been great to watch you, and can't wait to see what's ahead. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. If you can, turn on those notifications and leave us a positive review. They really help the show grow organically with new listeners. We have a free weekly newsletter. Sign up at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.